Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we have another brand new Mattel Jurassic World Epic Evolution figure to check out. We have the newest of the Gigantic Trackers, the Neovenator. And this one looks pretty cool, but one thing that is most striking, I think, about this figure is the fact that we actually have paint apps from the head to the tail the entire way through, which makes the figure look so much better than your average Mattel release does. But you can see the box art looks pretty much like it usually does when it comes to the Epic Evolution line. And then here on the back we can see kind of a sneak peek of the fact that these quills sort of pop up, and also an image over here of the Gigantic Trackers Triceratops as well. So let's pop the box open and check it out. And here is our Neovenator, and let's go ahead and get that hand. No, that one hand is really loose. I wonder if maybe that has something to do with an action feature. I'm not too sure, but it does look pretty cool, I will say that. It's definitely not the best Mattel figure out there. I think once the little quills that it has up there on the top of the head kind of pop up, it'll look a lot more interesting than it does currently, but it doesn't look bad either. I mean, it's definitely not an amazing paint scheme, but the paint application itself does look really good. So, you know, a little 50-50, I guess, as far as that goes. Still pretty cool looking figure, so let's go ahead and jump to a closer look and check it out from there. So starting up here at the head sculpt of the Neovenator, you can see some pretty decent looking skin texture. Nothing overly impressive, I will say, here in the face. It looks okay, probably some of the least impressive detailing I've seen on a Mattel figure, I would say, in quite a little while. But that also doesn't mean that it's bad. It's still good. It just tells you how good the detailing usually is from Mattel. You can see the nostrils right there. You can also see like a row of larger scoot-like scales moving down around the side of the face. We've got a nice red eye with a black pupil. That's not something we see too often from Mattel, is a red eye, and that looks pretty cool. There's also a nice gloss coat there. You can see we have a yellowish brown sort of a tone for the face, but then you have this darker variation of a gray that moves up from the snout and up and over the top of the head. We also have those quills up here. They as well have kind of like a reddish brown sort of a look to them. And then of course the lower jaw also sports that yellowish brown. We do have an articulated jaw, which you can see once you open the mouth. You've got some pretty decently sculpted teeth. I think the teeth actually look a little better than what we usually see for Mattel. Kind of sculpted, you know, out away from each other, you know, adding a little bit of a space between the teeth definitely helps to make them look a little nicer. Same deal for the lower jaw. They are painted with a light yellow, or like an off-white, definitely closer to like a light yellow. The inside of the mouth does sport some really nice detailing, and specifically right here, I really like the fine detail they've added in there where you can really see how the skin is stretching right there. That looks really neat. And then, of course, we've also got a tongue sculpted in here, and the tongue has some nice texturing. And I love how as you lead back here, they even have like the back of the throat kind of sculpted out. That's something also a little bit new, a little bit different from Mattel. And I think the detailing on the inside of the mouth and the upper side also looks a little nicer than what we're used to. Usually they actually have like that same kind of generic detail where they just create lines across, and even though it is mostly that going on, it just seems like there's a little bit extra added in there. So definitely a really nicely sculpted out inside of the mouth. As you lead back here along the course of the body, first of all, you start to see some green picking up here on the top of the head. And we also have some very nice looking scale detail actually up here. But as you lead back, you start to see that gray kind of break up and then mix with the green. So now we see the green kind of striping in between the gray moving down the course of the neck. You can also see some, again, larger bumpy scales, as well as like some very large sort of almost ridge-like osteoderms moving down here along the side of the neck of the dinosaur. You've got some skin wrinkles, and I like the variation to the skin texture. Again, you can see this type of scale detail looks pretty different than what we see down here, so that looks really cool. And as we continue to lead down, obviously we can see there's a spot of articulation here in the neck, which is going to have something to do with the action feature. You can also see that we continue to have more of those kind of ridge-like sort of osteoderms as you move down through the course of the body, as well as a good bit of variation to the scale detail moving through the course of the figure. Again, you can see larger and smaller scales leading through. We continue to have this gray that kind of designs and patterns down here into the side of the dinosaur. Very nicely sculpted arm here. You've got some nice muscle definition. And again, the scale detail actually looks really nice there. In the arm, you can see the elbow back there, and also a really nice hand sculpt. The fingers have some nice scoots moving down. down, and the nails are sculpted out very nicely. Not painted, but they do have a, satin shine to them, so they do have a gloss coat to differentiate the nails, which is a nice touch. As you lead back up here, you can see that we have some more of those kind of ridge-like osteoderms moving down along the back of the dinosaur. So now not only do we have a row on each side here, we also have some following along the spinal column there, giving the dinosaur a very kind of bumpy sort of a look to it. You can also see more of those osteoderms and stuff, those larger scales all over the place. So definitely looking kind of similar to the Rajasaurus that they had released a little ways back. As you move down into the thigh, you can see the muscle definition is nicely sculpted. Again, quite a bit of variation to the scale detail. And look at how cool it looks with the gray kind of leading down into the green leg. And it continues to kind of mesh back and forth. You can see it there in the knee and then down into the calf as you lead down, and then it kind of transitions entirely to that gray for the foot sculpt. You've got a very nice sculpt to the foot, a little bit big, of course, as usual, but it looks pretty decent, pretty crisp as far as the actual fine detail goes as well. You can see the scoots running down the toes, and nails, of course, are not painted, but they do again have that kind of satin shine, that nice gloss coat to them, and as does the dew claw. So definitely a step in the right direction as far as this figure goes for sure. And then we lead out here into the tail, and we continue to have pretty much the same style of sculpt and same style of paint, where the green and the gray kind of just trade places back and forth. But as we lead out here, the tail is completely overtaken by that gray. Once you lead out into the tip of the tail, it is now just that gray. Looks like, yes, we do have a swivel for that area. And then, of course, you do, as always, have articulated legs for the dinosaur, which are actually really jerky. For some reason, extremely jerky, and they have a very limited amount of, geez, that's hard to move, a little limited as far as the articulation goes. You don't have a whole lot of movement for it. And then, of course, we have the swivels here in the ankles. So not the greatest articulation that we've had on any Mattel figures in the past, but, it's at least got a heck of an improvement as far as the paint apps go. And then we also have that yellowish brown tone here running along the underside, which leads out here almost to the tail before tapering off after we, lead out from the groin. As we turn the dinosaur around, we're not going to see too much as far as a difference goes over here. Everything's going to look pretty close to the way it looked on the first side, except for, of course, the leg is trailing over here, whereas the leg is leading on the other side. But everything does still look really nice as you move through. Both the sculpt and paint on this honestly looks fantastic, I would say. The only area that I think is a little bit underwhelming when it comes to the fine detail is the face, but once you move past that, definitely sports a really nice sculpt and a very cool paint job. Also, in case you wanted to add this to your collection, there is the fax app code, which I forgot to show just a moment ago. But as far as the articulation goes, we kind of went over it when we were a little bit closer there. Again, we have the articulated jaw. It looks like the arms are kind of moving with the figure, but when I actually go down here, I can move them freely, so I'm not too sure what's going on there. They're a little bit, saggy. You can see they kind of just pop back into place. I guess we'll see once we get to the action feature if it has anything to do with the arms, because they're both kind of the same way. And then again, the leg articulation, we did see it on the previous side, but you can see it's very limited. Like, it doesn't have the range of motion that we normally have from a Mattel release. And then the swivel tail. So we do have a button up here on the top, and we're just going to kind of move it, and we'll see what happens. So obviously that is part of the action feature. The arms kind of go crazy and move with the jaw. As the jaw snaps, you can see here how the arms are kind of picking up. We go slow, and then we basically have like a chomping action feature with the figure. And then we also can, of course, do it backwards and go in reverse when it comes to that action feature. The one thing I don't understand, though, is how to pop the quills out, because it doesn't look like it's part of the action feature. We can see we do the action feature, they're not popping out. I don't know if I'm just supposed to pull it up to kind of give it the different look with the quills then. I assume. Maybe I'll figure that out after the review is over. But there's what our Neovenator looks like with the quills extended, and I will definitely say it looks a lot cooler once you actually have the quills out and extended. At first, it's a little underwhelming, I would say, when it comes to the appearance, but Mattel just usually gives you something unique and different about their figures and their designs, and I can see it now once the quills are extended. It does look a little bit cooler. But as far as a size goes, if I can get the legs in a good spot. When it comes to a length, you are looking at about 14¼ inches, or right around 36, closing in on 36.5 centimeters, but not quite. And then for a height, this of course would be dependent on the way that you position it, because right now he's kind of crouched a little bit. We can kind of position it up a little bit higher. It can even go probably higher than that, I would think. So right around 6 inches, or about the 15 centimeter mark, maybe 15.5 when we come back here to the quills at that height. And of course, if we actually extended the quills, it would be even taller. But for a size comparison, there is Mr. Peppo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect Day human being next to our Neovenator from Mattel. And you can see it does sport a pretty good size to it, but being a Gigantic Trackers figure, it usually does. You do expect at least a pretty decent size, and it's pretty much right there in the size range that you usually find for this type of figure. We've also got a comparison here with a Mattel Velociraptor and Dilophosaurus, which you can obviously see, and as to be expected, the Neovenator is quite a bit larger. Then we've got the Rorovore size range version here of Bumpy the Ankylosaurus, which should give you, yet again, a pretty good idea of the size. And then for the comparison that I think would probably be most helpful, we have another Gigantic Trackers release with the Yanchuanosaurus here next to the Neovenator, and you can see again, they're very similar in size. The Yanchuanosaurus might be just slightly taller, but as far as the overall body mass and size goes, they are very similar. So this brand new Mattel Jurassic World Epic Evolution Gigantic Trackers Neovenator is definitely a pretty cool figure, but it's not one of the best Mattel has had out. You know, it's definitely one of the best when it comes to the paint apps, but the sculpt, I feel like there's just something a little off about this one. It just looks a little strange to me, and I'm not too sure why, but I'm not saying that as in it's a bad thing, because it doesn't look terrible. It's just not as exciting as a normal Mattel sculpt is. For me, of course, not everybody's going to feel that way. That said, it does still sport some pretty nice sculpt and detail throughout. Once you leave the face, which I think the face is the weakest area as far as the sculpt goes of the figure, and you move down into the body, the fine detail does look really good, really impressive, and really crisp. The paintwork as well is fantastic on this. Not my favorite color scheme by Mattel, but there is a lot of paint to it, and it makes such a world of difference on the figure overall. Like, it just looks absolutely awesome when it comes to the amount of paint apps on this. It is one of the very few times you can look at a figure from Mattel and say, wow, it actually looks completely painted from head to tail. The only thing missing really would be nail paint, but the fact that we at least have that kind of gloss coat on it does help, and especially in the feet, does kind of look like we actually have nail paint on it. The quills look cool. I definitely like that as well. I think it is a nice touch to the figure, even if it may not be something the Dinosaur actually had. And the action feature is also pretty fun because it's a little different than what you usually get from Mattel. I like that they continue to find ways to give us new action features. And the articulation is okay, but it's a little limited on this one, at least when it comes to the legs compared to what you usually get from Mattel. But overall, this is still a really cool figure, and definitely a figure I recommend picking up. So if you are interested, head to your local Target, because that is exactly where I found mine, and hopefully you'll be able to snag yours. And if it's not there now, it definitely should be soon. So make sure you check your local Target, and also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.